it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. This story is respectfully dedicated to the memory of the U.S. Navy SEALs of Extortion 17. The Navy SEALs uncovered a secret from the sea. Part 1. "Okay, gentlemen," said the Navy officer as his team turned their attention to the screen. "Listen up. This is the Chinese artificial island called Fiery X Reef. Coordinates 9 degrees 32 north, 112 degrees 52 east. The Chinese government began building up the reef back in 2014 in the South China Sea, and today the island's a fully functional base that holds 12 hardened shelters with retractable roofs for mobile missile launches and contains enough hangars to accommodate 24 combat aircraft. The Chinese also built a 10,000-foot runway on the island's north shore that is capable of launching Chinese heavy transports and bombers. The base's estimated military complement is between 200 to 300 personnel, but can potentially hold up to 1,200 to 1,500. The 8 members of our unit, 2nd Squad, 2nd Platoon, SEAL Team 7, were crammed inside the wardroom of the USS Wyoming, an Ohio-class boomer submarine. The skipper of the Wyoming had secured the space for this classified briefing, and our squad leader for this mission, Lieutenant Jake Wolf, was behind a SIPRnet laptop, which was connected to the projector. The image on the screen showed a narrow, razor blade-shaped island, roughly 1,200 feet long, running from southwest to northeast in the South China Sea. On the island's northeastern end, an artificial rectangular-shaped lagoon, roughly 4,000 feet long and 3,500 feet wide, was carved nearly a third of the way into the center of the island where, within the bay, docks were constructed which would accommodate several Chinese destroyer-sized warships. Various buildings and facilities were constructed on the southern part of the island, which also included air defense missile systems, as well as close-in weapon systems, or CIWS rotary cannon emplacements. Ostensibly, the Chinese government claims that Fiery X Reef belongs to the Chinese oil conglomerate RG Petroleum, but we know from the satellite photos and intercepted Chinese naval communications that the reef is actually under command of the Chinese military, in particular, the People's Liberation Army and Navy. Lieutenant Wolf advanced the slide, and a picture of a white painted ship which looked to be some sort of large civilian research vessel appeared on the screen. "This is Yang Hong 09, one of 60 370-foot-long vessels, which displaces 4,425 tons, that the Chinese say they use for oceanic research. About 4 months ago, the Yang Hong 09 left Qingdao with an experimental deep-sea mini-submarine on her decks and headed towards the Baltic Sea. About a week ago, our satellites captured this picture of the Yang Hong docked within the artificial lagoon inside Fiery X Reef, minus the mini-sub. Less than 24 hours after the photo was taken, all communication with the island had ceased." Lieutenant Wolf advanced the slides a few more times. "Technically, Fiery X Reef is located within Philippine territorial waters," continued Lieutenant Wolf, "but the Philippine Navy is hardly in any position to challenge the Chinese. In fact, the Chinese military has ordered a 15-mile exclusion zone around the reef and forbidden any Philippine naval vessel to enter it, even when the Philippine Navy reported that there were distress calls coming from the facility. Now, these latest photos, which were taken a week ago by Philippine Navy drones, shows a hole had been blown into the side of the Yang Hong in what appears to have been a failed effort to scuttle the ship. The next series of slides were taken at varying angles by the drone and showed somewhat blurry but unmistakable images of the research vessel Yang Hong 09 docked inside the lagoon at Fiery X Reef, listing to one side, black and brown smoke pouring from a gaping hole in the starboard side of the ship. More disturbingly, plumes of black smoke could be seen rising from various other areas of the base. And, continued Lieutenant Wolf, the Philippine Navy was also able to capture this footage before the Chinese Air Force chased their naval frigates away. The lieutenant hit the play button on the video which was embedded in the slide briefing, which displayed the image of Fiery X Reef taken from somewhere east of the island. The footage was shaky as the video was filmed from aboard the Philippine frigate Jose Rizal, roughly 2 miles from shore. Zoomed in, however, the video showed 2 light grey fighter aircraft descending on the reef from northeast to southwest, before dropping several bombs, which exploded along the entire northern coast of the Chinese base. In the background, the reverberating sounds of jet engines could be heard, followed by the muffled whoom, whoom, whoom of explosions as the bombs struck the base. Voices of alarmed and confused Filipino sailors could also be heard, followed by frantic warnings and alert sirens as the 2 fighter jets pulled up and banked around, headed directly towards the Philippine Navy frigate. The video then ended abruptly. Our intel confirmed that the 2 jets which hit the Chinese base are Chinese Shenyang J-15 fighters, launched from the carrier Shandong, cruising 30 nautical miles north of Fiery X Reef, continued Lieutenant Wolf. They hit the airstrip with anti-runway ordnance, making it completely unusable. The Chinese haven't mentioned anything about the incident yet, but it's a sure bet that the state-run media is already preparing a story to blame either the United States or the Philippines for the attack on their base. Why would the Chinese attack their own base? Asked Big Petty Officer First Class Paul Gamesby, our Bravo team leader. This guy was built like a brick bulldozer, even by SEAL standards. Are they afraid we'll capture it and use it to land aircraft? With one of their 2 aircraft carriers in the vicinity, and with the 15-mile exclusion zone which the Chinese have placed around the island, I don't think they're too concerned about folks landing on the reef, said Lieutenant Wolf, and he furrowed his eyebrows as if realizing something. If anything, I'd say they're concerned about anyone trying to leave the island. That would explain why the Chinese tried to scuttle the Yang Han, I said. But do we know why she set sail for the Baltic Sea in the first place? That's not exactly a short or easy journey from Qingdao to the Baltic, nor is it someplace where we'd usually expect to find Chinese research vessels. Do we know what the Chinese were doing there, LT? Lieutenant Wolf scanned over his notes. We know that the Yang Han crossed the North Sea into the Baltic Sea 2 months ago, and anchored some 50 miles south of the Åland Islands in the middle of the Baltic between Sweden and Finland. She remained anchored there in international waters for approximately 5 days, with the mini-submarine still on her deck. However, Swedish naval sound surveillance systems picked up unusual sonar contacts at a point due north of the Åland Islands, which they didn't recognize as a military submarine, but was definitely some type of submersible craft. You saying that the Chinese may have moved north of the Åland Islands, plopped their submersible into the water, and then moved back south with a fake submersible on their deck? Asked Petty Officer Second Class Harold Johnson. Harry was a running back with the UCLA, but postponed the opportunity for a shot at the NFL to serve as a SEAL first. That would sound like some world-class conspiracy theory shit, Harry, said the lieutenant. But that's exactly what naval intelligence believes. The Chinese knew to be at that exact location right when our satellite passed overhead. Then, after dark, they pulled up anchor to drop off their submarine on the north side of the Åland Islands, before returning to their original position before our satellite passed over the area just in time to get their picture taken with a fake submersible on the deck. Well, assuming that our intelligence data is on point, I said, that still doesn't explain what the Chinese were doing in the middle of the Baltic Sea. What's so important in the waters north of the Åland Islands that the Chinese would want to sneak a submersible there? Good question, Chief, answered the lieutenant. Have you ever heard about the crashed Millennium Falcon that the Swedes found buried in the ocean there? Now, my name is Chief Petty Officer Corey Pretty, United States Navy, and the minute LT Wolf mentioned some crashed science fiction spaceship at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, my mind flashed back to my grandfather, Mr. John B. Pretty. Now, Granddad was a sergeant first class who served as an infantry platoon sergeant with the famous 1st Infantry Division during the Vietnam War. And boy did Granddad have some unbelievable stories to tell me about his time in a region of South Vietnam called the Iron Triangle. Now, to tell you the truth, I didn't believe him when he told me those crazy tales before I joined the Navy. Ironically enough, I think he'd be the only one who'd actually believe me, if I ever got around to telling this story to anyone. Anyway, Grandpa Johnny had 3 children, all of them girls. Don't get me wrong, by all accounts he adored all 3 of his kids. But only having girls left him endlessly frustrated, as if his beloved gods of war had abandoned him. He wanted at least one son to carry on the pretty family legacy of serving in the United States Army infantry, but having no boys, the dream of carrying on our warrior family tradition seemed to have eluded him. Grandad had 6 grandchildren, however, 3 boys, although I am the only one who joined the military. Grandpa Johnny was like a father to me, since my own dad wasn't really around much. When I told him I was joining the Navy to become a Navy SEAL, Grandpa Johnny grunted. "Corey, why the hell do you want to go and be a wet Marine? Haven't I always told you kids that infantrymen hate to get wet? Why do you think the military will never allow women to go into combat?" "Grandpa," I said, "you do know that we have females serving in the infantry, right?" "What?" spat Grandpa Johnny, his cigar flying from his mouth. "Hang on, Corey. You won't believe me that Vietnamese Bigfoot hates commies, but you expect me to believe that we got dames serving in my beloved infantry. You know they test for weed, right, Corey?" "Grandpa," I said, "you know that I don't..." Grandad hugged me tightly and said, "Go on, boy. Go get out of Ohio. Go be a wet Marine. Get out of here and fall off the back of an aircraft carrier. Whatever the hell you Navy SEALs do." The next morning, Grandpa Johnny Pretty drove me to the naval recruiting station in Akron. The pride in his eyes that day only surpassed 32 months later, when I finally earned the Golden Trident of a United States Navy SEAL at Coronado, California. That was 14 years ago, and although Grandpa Pretty didn't live long enough to see me pin chief rank on, I'm pretty sure he's smiling down on me from heaven as he leads a platoon of boozed-up angels fighting against those damn commie demons. "Come again, LT?" I said. "You said the Swedes found what at the bottom of the Baltic Sea?" "The Millennium Falcon, Chief. It was a YT-3000 Karelian light freighter that had gone through several owners. Set out part black, part Vietnamese petty officer second class, Terry, and Nguyen. Our tall, lean, designated medic took everything seriously, to the point that a lot of our jokes went right over his head. Well, the most famous owner was Han Solo, who made the Kessel run it." "Ah, geez, Terry," said Petty Officer Second Class Vincent Vinny Anders. "Chief knows what the damn Millennium Falcon is. His old house has seen the original Battlestar planet Trek Galactica Wars of the Apes when they first came out in drive-in theaters. Eh, right, Chief?" "At ease, Vinny," I said. "Are you shipbirds done?" said the LT. He wasn't mad. He knew that when his SEALs joked, we actually knew how serious the upcoming mission was. I've worked with LT Wolf long enough to know that when he didn't allow his SEALs a little levity, the explosive diarrhea had already hit the fan and shit was messy. So this was not good. "What the media has dubbed the crashed Millennium Falcon," said Lieutenant Wolf, "has also been called the Baltic Sea Anomaly. In 2011, a Swedish dive team named Ocean X were diving in the vicinity, looking for sunken treasure, when they discovered an unusual stone formation 300 feet underwater on the ocean floor, which they described as resembling the Millennium Falcon. That's the name. The popular scientific theory is that the stone structure is some type of antediluvian temple." "Antediluvian?" said Vinny. "That means before the great biblical flood in Genesis, Vinny," I said. "Yeah," said Wolf. "The structure is antediluvian, which means it's over 5,000 years old, if not older. And we know the Chinese did at least 5 secret dives to the site in a period of 3 years prior to this last major incursion into the area. What prompted them to deploy a full-on research vessel and an experimental mini-submarine for their last trip, though, that's still a mystery." "So, they want us to go in and find out what the temple is all about, sir?" asked Petty Officer First Class Darren Hillard, our Alpha Team leader. "No," Lieutenant Wolf shook his head. SecDef couldn't give less than 2 shits about sunken temples. The Chinese did all the hard work already. We're going to Fiery X Reef to find out what the Chinese brought back. Now, most operators will tell you that battles are won or lost in the planning stages long before the battle were conducted and the first round was fired. A lot of folks look at us and think that we make shit look easy, but trust me, there is no easy day for a SEAL. The only easy day for a SEAL was yesterday. LT Wolf knew this, which is why he's damn good at his job and why men like me will follow him. Wolf went over in meticulous detail the mission analysis and most recent intel data on our objective, including our assets available, resources available, and the time available to accomplish the mission and extract out the target area. On top of this, we went over our planned courses of action to get into Fiery X Reef, actions on contact, risk mitigation strategies, contingency plans should things go south, and a myriad of other minute details which couldn't be overlooked. Afterwards, LT demanded that every member of his team, including me, the team's senior NCO, back-brief him on everything which he'd just discussed in the past 2 hours, to ensure that everyone on the team was on the same page. Despite the SEAL's reputation, we couldn't afford to have Johnny freaking Rambos on the team, pulling lone wolf bullshit and jeopardizing the mission. Okay, gentlemen, you know the drill. If you have a fiancée, girlfriend, or newlywed wife, dump her. If you're an expectant father, deny you're the dad, concluded Lieutenant Wolf. No gooses. No gooses, we all replied in unison. Having been dismissed by LT, the rest of the team got up to leave the wardroom to get some chow. Our newest and youngest member of the team, Petty Officer Second Class Blake Peoples, walked up to me. Well, he was from Ohio, same as me, and was so green that he'd yet to serve in Iraq or Afghanistan. Well, the kid still had some baby fat on him. Hey, Chief, got a minute? I looked at the lieutenant, who said, Go ahead, Chief. I'm going to hit the head and grab a pop. Back in 3. I nodded. Okay, Blake, you got me for 3. What's up? I was just curious, said Petty Officer Peoples, as he waited for the LT to leave the wardroom. What does Lieutenant Wolf mean when he tells us to break up with our wives or girlfriends right before a mission? I mean, he's not being literal, is he? And why does everyone say, no gooses? Jeez, Blake, I laughed. You've never seen Top Gun. Tom Cruise, Kelly McGillis, the guy who played Batman. You ain't ever seen war movies? Yeah, Chief, said the young SEAL. I mean, I like war movies. Saving Private Ryan, Black Hawk Down, you know, that kind of shit. I just can't get into the Hollywood war movie crap where the hero always comes home at the end. Well, not always, I said. The hero most definitely doesn't always come back home at the end. You see, in Top Gun, Tom Cruise didn't fly the Tomcat alone. Maverick had a RIO, or Radio Intercept Officer, aboard his F-14, also known as the Gearbo, guy in back. That guy's name was Goose, and he'd just gotten married and had a kid, or some shit like that. Guess what happened to him? He died, said Petty Officer Peoples. Splattered all over the canopy of his Tomcat during ejection, I replied. Same thing happened to the newly married guy when Charlie Sheen made that god-awful Navy SEAL movie out of Little Creek. Charlie Sheen made a Navy SEAL movie? Said Peoples. Yep, it sucked hard, I answered. I'm talking sucked hard like a golf ball through a garden hose. I recall that they fire a Stinger missile from inside of a moving vehicle at a tank or some stupid shit like that. Anyway, the point is, the newly married bachelor, or the foob that's getting ready to be a dad for the first time, always gets his ass handed to him. So, if we break up with our significant other, or if she's pregnant and we deny it's our kid, we sort of break that curse, said Peoples. Well, that's how it works, I replied. Does it really work, Chief? I smiled. Well, I did a combined 6 tours to Iraq and the GAN with the LT, and you know how many guys we lost? We lost one. His name was Goose. Or rather, His name was Guzman. Let me guess, Chief, said Peoples. Guzman was just married and found out he was going to be a father right before he deployed. You got it, kid, I said. Ever since then, the LT has been having everyone break up or divorce their significant other and abandon their kids before every op. He doesn't mean it literally, unless that's what you literally had to do to keep your head in the game without getting it shut off. What LT means is that you have to divorce yourself from your family and remember who you are and what you're doing when you're out there. If you spend 2 seconds in La La Land worrying about if Mary Jane Roddencrotch back home is showing Jody a good time, you'll get yourself and your team killed. Roger that, Chief, said Peoples. I'm tracking. So, Blake, I asked, how's your fiancée, Tanisha, is it? Well, just found out she was pregnant before we left San Diego, Chief, he replied. No, I said. You aren't engaged to be married, and you aren't going to be a father, at least not until this mission is over. Got it, Blake? Roger, Chief. Understood. But what should I think about if we're on standby and not on mission status? What occupies your mind, Chief? Got any hobbies, Peoples? I said. I mean, do you have any interests outside of what you do in the Navy? Well, I do enjoy fishing, Chief. Good, I answered as LT Wolf returned to the wardroom. You can go think about fishing. Now get the fuck out of here and get some chow and some rest. I still have to discuss contingency plans with the LT. Lieutenant Wolf waited until Petty Officer Blake secured the hatch of the wardroom behind him before walking over and setting an ice-cold Dr. Pepper next to me. We lost one guy, he said as he took a seat across from me. Yeah, I fudged the numbers a bit, LT, I said, popping the top of the soda can while remembering all 7 of the Navy SEALs we'd lost in the past 4 years. 3 KIA, 4 WIA. Well, they were all good men, the best warriors in the world. They did everything right, but we still lost them anyway. I understand, Chief, said the LT. You have to keep their heads in the game. The young ones like Peoples are full of piss and vinegar and itching to prove themselves to the team. You have to reel them in, while the vets like Hillard, Gimsby, and Johnson can get overconfident and complacent, so we have to get back to basics with them. It's a constant cycle. I don't envy your job, Chief, even though you're one of the best in the business. Lieutenant Wolf popped open the top of his Sprite and took a sip. Hell, remember when I first took over the team? 3 months into our first tour of the Ghan, and I was still a cherry-ass lieutenant junior grade. Lieutenant Wolf sat back, lost in thought for a second. Wolf was a 26-year-old African-American, lean, with broad shoulders and legs like tree trunks. He looked every bit the part of an anti-gun, Hollywood war hero action star which we all hate the fuck out of. Except that Wolf was a real hero whose haunted eyes had seen more horrors than 1,000 Hollywood action movie stars combined. Yeah, that was right after Lieutenant Guzman got killed, continued Lieutenant Wolf. Here I was, not even 4 months being a lieutenant junior grade. Green as shit, and now I was in charge of a squad of Navy SEALs in Kabul. I don't know what I would have done without you, Chief. You didn't do too badly, sir, I said. Hell, by the time we left the Ghan, Captain Taliban and his band of merry lunatics had a $200,000 bounty on your head. Well, they had a $350,000 bounty on yours, Chief, laughed Lieutenant Wolf. We should all be so lucky, sir, I said. Nothing like being the most hunted guy in all of Afghanistan. Well, we both had a good laugh at our own gallows humor. I liked Lieutenant Wolf. It's a great thing when the command and the senior NCO of unit mesh together well. It means we get shit done, and we get shit done with none of the egos, biases, or any of the other bullshit which prevents other units from accomplishing their missions. Chief, said Lieutenant Wolf, suddenly turning serious. I've worked with you long enough to know that you've got something on your mind. I think I know what it is. Corey, but go ahead. Well, sir, I sighed as I put down my soda. I was just thinking about Panama back in '89, Operation Just Cause. You're talking about SEAL Team 4 at Paitilla Airport, said Lieutenant Wolf. Yep, I said. The operation to capture Noriega. The SEALs had to secure his private airstrip so that he couldn't escape. That was a U.S. Army Ranger mission all the way. Well, they had the numbers and shit to quickly and violently take and hold Paitilla Airport. That's their mission. That's what they do. But instead, the brass sent in 40 SEALs, when we usually only operate in teams of 8. They ended up getting ambushed by a militia element of the Panamanian Defense Force, and we lost 4 SEALs killed and 9 wounded. And, you're wondering why they're only sending in 8 SEALs into a heavily fortified military Chinese base, where we'll be outnumbered hundreds to 1, when dropping in a battalion of Army Airborne Rangers would make more sense? Lieutenant Wolf leaned back, the look in his eyes telling me that he was thinking the exact same thing and, just like me, had no good answers. What do you think, LT? Were the SecDef's orders really so vague that they read, "Find out what the Chinese brought back from the Baltic"? The Chinese brought back a research ship. Then they tried to scuttle it. Yeah, Chief, said Wolf. That's it. That's all the SecDef gave us. There isn't anything specific that they want us to look for, so we don't have a targeted objective. That makes it difficult to satisfy the needs of our political masters, but it also gives us free rein to dictate how we're going to carry out this mission. Our mission is simply to find whatever it was that the Chinese brought back from their secret expedition to the Baltic Sea, and, apparently, according to the SecDef, we will know it when we see it. Even if this mission might start a war with China? I asked. Sir, if we raid the highly secured Fiery X Reef looking for something that we have no idea what it is, there's 1,007% chance that we'll probably come into some type of contract which will involve fingers squeezing triggers. Is Washington really willing to risk going to war with the people that are funding the current anti-Trump movement? Well, apparently they are, conceded Lieutenant Wolf, taking another sip of his Sprite. But you have to admit, Chief, we've received far more vague reports than this in the past. Remember when the politicians told DevGru to send us into Pakistan to look for some tall guy with a beard? Well, yeah, we've had our fair share of bullshit missions based off of half-assed intel, I answered. But, to tell you the truth, sir, if I'm going into a secured Chinese military facility in the middle of the ocean to look for something that they brought back from a frickin' crashed Millennium Falcon at the bottom of the ocean, I'm going in looking for Chewbacca. Chewbacca, said Lieutenant Wolf with a dour smile on his face. Chief, if I'm going to search for what the Chinese brought back from the Millennium Falcon, I'm looking for Princess Leia. Well, can you believe that shit? That was the extent of our mission. Go into a place where you're outnumbered 20 to 1. Go find something. We didn't know what the fuck the something was, but you better not damage it, whatever it is. Somehow get the fuck out of the hole we sent you into. Bring whatever the hell it is back. Then go disappear and shut the fuck up for a few years, until you write a book that becomes a bestseller at Barnes & Noble. Yep. Welcome to SEAL Life 101. Anyway, the USS Wyoming cruised into the South China Sea and remained undetected for a couple of days as we closed in on our objective. Okay, so now here's the deal. I could describe all of the hoo-ha shit that we did to get the team into Fiery X Reef undetected. How the Wyoming slipped into the South China Sea and easily penetrated the Chinese naval fleet blockade. And how we used SDVs to launch the Wyoming to the north shore of the Fiery X Reef. But I'm not going to, because fuck you, commie bitches. You jokers can keep drowning your Spec Ops folks out in the ocean while trying to imitate how Navy SEALs do what we do. Anyway, it was approximately 0400 in the morning and still dark when we hit the north shore of Fiery X Reef. Lieutenant Wolf and I were the command element of the squad. PO-1 Hillard was in charge of Alpha Team with Harry Johnson and Terry Nguyen, while PO-1 Gimsby had Bravo Team with Vincent Anders and Blake Peoples. None of us had to say a word. Our training was so that we could communicate with just our eyes, every SEAL able to anticipate and predict the actions of the next, moving inexorably forwards and capable of producing a continuous flow of firepower and dead bad guys, should the situation dictate. With the waves crashing on the coral reef masking our movements, we rapidly secured and camouflaged our SDVs at a location on the shoals which hid them from casual view, and quickly took up defensive firing positions on the sandy embankment which bordered the runway. In front of us was an area of open beach that stretched nearly 50 meters, ending in a surprisingly well-maintained grassy area. Hilliard's team was on the right of our line, Gimsby's team on the left. Wolf and I were in the middle. It was pitch black, the peaceful and tranquil sounds of the ocean splashing behind us. Thermals revealed absolutely no signs of life across the runway, and no movement anywhere inside the base. There were lights on in various structures further south, but those lights were dim, some red, indicating that they were on due only to backup generator power. Though there were lights on the runway, none were lit, encasing the immediate area in pitch darkness. "Clear," whispered Hilliard. "Clear," said Gimsby. "Go," said Wolf. Hilliard's team of SEALs got up and raced across the black runway, weapons at the high, ready, followed by me and Lieutenant Wolf. Seconds later, Gimsby's team followed. As I raced towards the tarmac, I noticed several deep craters in the runway, at least 10 feet in diameter and 6 feet deep, the result of the Chinese bombing strike several days earlier. To my left were several hangars where at least 4 Chinese fighter jets and 3 transports were housed. There was no way that any of them could have used the runway to leave. The question quickly popped up in my head. Why would the Chinese bomb their runway before getting their fighters out first? Why were they in such a hurry? When we reached the north side of the runway, which faced the beach, we again went to the prone in the sand, each SEAL having their weapon raised and scanning for potential threats. There were 2 sandbag emplacements about 30 meters in front of us, one protecting a surface-to-air missile emplacement, and one protecting an air defense gun emplacement. Both appeared to be unmanned and abandoned. After only a few seconds, the team leaders again announced, "Clear," after which we immediately assaulted the 2 air defense emplacements. We found both to be unoccupied, although we did find that each were covered with dried brown splotches of liquid, and the smell of rot and metal mingled in the air with the pungent scent of dead fish. None of us had to say a word. We knew from experience that the air defense emplacements were saturated with dried blood and flesh, and that it was at least a week old. "Sir," I whispered. "The Yang Hong is a click southeast of us, still docked inside this artificial lagoon," replied the lieutenant. "That's the first thing that the Chinese blew. That's our first stop." Infiltrating into fiery X Reef through the artificial lagoon would have been the easiest route for us, especially since our first objective was to investigate the Yang Hong that was docked there. But that would have left us and our SDVs critically exposed and vulnerable in what was likely the most secure spot on the base. The route which we'd planned to take across the base was considerably more difficult, but ultimately tactically more sound. The easy way will always get you killed, which is why we never take the easy way. Easy is lazy, and lazy is body bag. The team moved swiftly in a wedge formation, Alpha to the right, Bravo left, with me and the LT in the center of the formation, every SEAL scanning their sectors as we crossed the bombed-out tarmac. The only sounds that I could hear were the waves calmly slapping the beach, fading steadily behind us, and the muffled clutter of combat boots that went from beach sand to grass to pavement. The area seemed totally bereft of any living soul except us, as we quickly crossed the runway and stacked against what appeared to be a large maintenance hangar on the far side of the tarmac. Though it was pitch dark, our night vision devices illuminated details of our surroundings as if it were broad daylight. Harry and Terry from Hilliard's Alpha team swiftly entered the bay door which hung open from the hangar, instinctively making sure that our 6 o'clock was clear of threats. It seemed like an hour had passed since we landed on Fiery X, but in reality it probably only took us no more than 5 minutes to get from the shore and across the runway to breach the outer perimeter of the base. "It's clear, LT," came Hilliard from inside the hangar. He was whispering onto his earpiece that provided our main internal communications. This place is a mess. They got a helicopter in here, but it looks to be damaged. Also, a lot of bloodstains and... The mic went silent for a second before Hilliard came back up. Looks like there was a firefight here. Terry found a bunch of AKs on the ground and spent shell casings, but no bodies. Plus the place smells like rotten fish, just like those defensive emplacements back at the beach. "Copy," replied the LT. We both pulled out our high-power binoculars and began scanning the terrain ahead of us. The team was at the southwest corner of the hangar, looking roughly east across another sandy open danger area, about 50 meters wide, before it hit an auxiliary runway which ran parallel to the main runway. Across from this was a main road with what looked to be several rows of one-story housing billets on the other side. Several of the doors to these buildings were wide open, a few dim red lights showing from within. Behind them were several other two-story buildings, these more spaced out. "What you got, Corey?" asked the LT. "Control tower and side buildings 200 meters right. Barracks and operations buildings 100 meters direct front. No movement." "No movement of the lagoon," whispered the lieutenant into his earpiece. "Main observation tower is north of here. Looks like 2 random structures and a weather radar station located at the mouth of the lagoon. No movement detected there. Bound to be the barracks area. Bravo, move." The entire reef was as flat as a postage stamp, with structures spaced far and wide apart. It was going to be like sneaking across the deck of an aircraft carrier. Gimsby's team raced forwards across the open area, then took cover halfway across, providing cover as the rest of us sprinted the rest of the way to the cover of the barracks area. As I closed in on the barracks, I could see that some type of firefight had taken place here as bullet holes pockmarked the concrete walls and shattered windows. Again, dry blood, flesh, and the stench of rotting fish was everywhere. Once we'd secured the perimeter, Gimsby's team dashed the rest of the way to regroup with the team. In less than 3 seconds, the team had established a tight perimeter with 360-degree security around us. "Where are the bodies?" I whispered. "There are signs of a fight, but no bodies." "They couldn't have just gotten up and left," said Hilliard. He was at my shoulder, peering around a corner of the barracks building, his MK-14 EBR up and searching for targets. Most of the team carried Heckler & Koch HK-416 battle rifles, but I preferred my trusty M4 with M203 40mm grenade launcher attachment. "Well, LT?" I knew that the LT and I were thinking the same thing. Where were the bodies? Where was everyone? Up to now, this was way too easy. As Murphy's Law of War states, if your advance into enemy territory seems too easy, it's a trap. "Okay," he said, checking his watch. "We're actually ahead of schedule. Gimsby, your team check this barracks out for any bodies or survivors. Hilliard, your team check the one on the left. Chief and I will take the one on the right. Back here in 3 mics. Move." Unlike the other barracks buildings, the barracks door which LT and I were checking out was closed, although I could see a dim red light through the small broken window set in the door. I went in first and faced a long, dimly lit corridor, the air reeking of death and rotting fish. I swept right down the corridor while LT Wolf swiftly entered the corridor to the left. There were 4 sets of double doors lining each side of the corridor, while the entrance door at the far side of the corridor was wide open. Going through the first set of doors to my right, my night vision devices revealed that this was a bay room, roughly 20 feet wide by 50 feet long, lined with simple lockers and narrow bunk beds. Military clothing and gear littered the space, along with personal shower and toilet articles, although the beds were relatively neat and made up. It looked as if the inhabitants of this bay had left in a hurry, but I saw no signs of a struggle or blood. There was a strong scent of decay and rotting fish in the air, but it wasn't emanating from this room. I backed out of the bay just as LT came out of the opposite bay room. "It's a true bay," whispered Lieutenant Wolf. "Messy, but no signs of a struggle." "Same here," I said. "Wrecked, like a drill sergeant threw shit everywhere, but no casualties." We quickly went up to the second set of bay doors, but the results were the same. The two bays were messed up, bunk beds turned over, and several windows smashed out. But no signs of casualties, although the smell had got worse. The third set of doors opened into the restroom and shower stalls. I found large splotches of dry blood in a couple of the shower stalls, and bloody handprints, as well as pulled-down shower curtains, but, again, no bodies. Judging by the toilet articles scattered on the sinks and floors, I concluded that this was the female restrooms and showers. The fourth set of doors on my side of the corridor were wide open, and long brown dried stains spilled from the room, as if something had been dragged from the inside of the room to the outside. The horrific smell was coming from inside of this room. With my M4 at the high, ready, and fighting back the urge to puke, I stepped inside of the Charnel house. Dried chunks of flesh and bones were splattered across the room, mingled with the padding and springs of the flimsy mattresses from the cheaply made bunk beds which had been turned over. Wall lockers also knocked over, as if someone had desperately tried to create some kind of ineffective barrier against some unknown attacker. Unlike before, here in this room I found what was left of a few bodies. Arms, legs, torsos, all ripped apart and seemingly with large chunks torn out of them, as if something had feasted on the unfortunate victims. The head of what appeared to have once been a female stared at me with dead eyes from the corner, the entire bottom half of her face looking as if it had been completely torn away. I was glad that I could only see the grisly details from within the limitations of my night vision goggles, which showed things in various shades of green. I was absolutely sure that this room had been colored blood red. I took a step back and was startled to run into a body. "Holy shit," whispered Lieutenant Wolf. "What the hell happened here?" "Looks like some folks tried to create a barrier to hide behind," I shuddered. "Well, looks like it didn't work," answered Wolf. "Whoever did this dragged the remains outside," I whispered. "Look at the blood trails." We followed the trail of thick blood and gore out the back door and into the street. I was grateful to be out of the stench of that stifling barracks and in the relatively fresh night air. We linked up with the other two teams. Each of them also reported discovering the horrific carnage which overcame the unfortunate people who'd stayed inside these barracks, but finding no evidence of what violently did these people in, except for the thick bloody drag marks which seemed to come out of each barracks building. We also observed bloody drag marks that emerged from the multi-story buildings behind the barracks. Whatever had happened to these people had happened quickly, with only very few of them seemingly prepared to defend themselves. "All those blood trails seem to be heading in the same direction, LT," I said. "Yeah," Lieutenant Wolf nodded. "They're all going in the direction of the lagoon. Okay, let's move out to the Yang Hong. Alpha, take point. Try to stick to the shadows. We can't assume that we're alone on this reef." Hilliard's team led the way across the concrete pavement, sticking to the cover of buildings where they could, but the far spacing between structures left us exposed in the open most of the time. Still, we remained unmolested as we came to yet another empty hangar at the end of the auxiliary runway. We were close to the lagoon now, only 400 meters away or so, when Hilliard's team reached a main intersection in the road. All of a sudden, Petty Officer Nguyen stopped and kneeled in front of a large street sign at the side of the road, with arrows written in Chinese pointing in different directions attached to the pole. Without having to say a word, the rest of the team went prone, weapons facing out, while I rushed forwards to where Nguyen and his team leader Hilliard were kneeling. "What you got, Terry?" I whispered. "Hey, Chief," said Nguyen. "This is supposed to be a military base, right?" "Yeah, or at least that's what we were told." "Well, Chief," said Nguyen, pointing up at the street sign, "this directional sign says that facility over there to our left, with the two randoms, is actually a restricted research facility. Check out the panel underneath the arrow. It says, authorized personnel only. Only Yuan Tongguo 776 cardholders permitted. Yuan Tongguo 776 card, I said. That's the Chinese equivalent of an above top-secret security clearance. I looked in the direction that the arrow was pointing, where a narrow road ran parallel to the lagoon and ended about half a click away at the compound at the extreme eastern part of the reef, where the mouth of the lagoon opened into the sea. The compound was surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with rolls of razor wire, behind which sat 2 randoms and the weather station. At a separate dock, which I now noticed could only be accessed from the secure compound, sat the listing hull of the Yang Hong. Minutes later, Lieutenant Wolf had us in an office on the 2nd floor of the hangar, looking out over the lagoon. Surprisingly, there were a few white lights still on at some parts of the compound in which the research facility was located, meaning that some generators were still running there. We scanned the target area for a few minutes, looking for any sign of movement. Despite having a relatively clear path up to this point, the LT wasn't taking any chances, nor was he going to lead his men into the trap due to complacency. "Well," he said, taking his monocular from his eyes as he ducked down behind the windowsill. "I still don't see any movement, but from this vantage point, looks like the majority of the fighting took place at the research facility compound." Both Gimsby and Hilliard scanned the area using the powerful scope of their advanced battle rifles. "Yep, no movement here either, though I can see where the fencing on the side closest to the lagoon had been ripped down," whispered Gimsby. "It's bent inwards, like whatever tore it down tried to get in from that side." "The main front gate to the compound is also torn down," added Hilliard. "Only the gate looks like it was forced outwards, as if they were trying to get out of the compound." "Well, I guess this answers the question of why they only sent in 8 SEALs instead of a battalion of Rangers," I said. "Do you suppose that Hire suspected that this base would be deserted and didn't tell us, LT?" "Wouldn't surprise me, Chief," the lieutenant responded. "So, wait," whispered Peoples. "The SecDef and folks in Washington would send us on a highly classified mission without giving us all the intel that they have?" "New guys catching on," chuckled Anders. "Sometimes, man, the folks in charge only have partial intel or incomplete data. In those cases, we'd be sent in with orders to either verify the intel that they have or disprove it. Or, in this case, to steal it," said Peoples. "We don't steal, Peoples," I corrected. "The Navy SEALs never steal." "But we'll sure as hell acquire a bunch of shit, right, Chief?" added Johnson. "Well, if they have it lying around," I replied. "Well, the sun's going to be up in an hour and a half to 2 hours," said the lieutenant. "We need to be off the beach by then. We'll use this hangar as our rallying point in case anyone gets separated or if shit goes south. Okay, let's move out and see what we can acquire." Leaving the hangar behind us, we moved in a wedge formation across the uncomfortably open ground towards the research facility compound, until we got to within 100 meters of the wide-open front gates. From there, the squad transitioned into a bounding overwatch maneuver, where one element of the SEALs rushed forward, while the second element stayed low to provide covering fire. After a couple of bounds, we were past the front gates of the compound, rushing past 2 light poles which shone a dim light upon a blood-splattered guard shack. 2 AK-47 rifles lay outside amid a sea of empty shell casings, but, as before, we saw no signs of the bodies. Lieutenant Wolf was with Bravo team and had secured a corner of a small structure which looked to be a utility building. I was with Alpha team, which was across the street and had taken up positions at the base of the smaller of the 2 red-domed buildings. We were again engulfed in shadows like ninjas as we stopped to scan our surroundings before proceeding. There had indeed been some type of heavy firefight here, as the ground was littered with spent casings, dropped weapons, and torn military clothing with ripped flesh still attached. Pools of dry blood also tarnished the pavement and sand, and everywhere was evidence that the dead had been dragged towards the lagoon. I looked around, trying to see if any of the security cameras appeared to be active, when I saw the ones that were mounted on the light poles that we had just passed. "Clear," said Hilliard. "Clear," said the lieutenant. "Hey, wait up, LT," I said. "What's up, Chief?" "Just give me a second, LT," I responded. "I want to check something out real quick. Terry, come with me." The rest of the team stayed put, scanning their sectors for any signs of threats which we might have missed as Nguyen followed me while I raced into the small concrete guard shack. Inside, 2 overturned chairs faced a desk with half a dozen monitors and a public address microphone. All of the security monitors were black, but a faint green light at the base of the monitor control board was still on, indicating that there was still power going to the security cameras. "What's up, Chief?" asked Nguyen. "Can you get these security monitors up?" I asked. "Hold on," said Nguyen, reading the labels on the control board under the monitors. "Yeah, I think so," he said as he began typing into the keyboard connected to the main security monitor control board. Immediately, 3 of the security monitors came to life, one showing the grey-green tinted view of the area just outside of the guard shack, as well as the torn-down entrance gate. The second one showed only a dark grey screen, and the last showed only static. "Okay, Chief," said Terry. "These first 2 scenes are showing a feed from wherever those cameras are mounted. That third one with the static has power still going to it, but it looks to have been knocked out somehow." I see. Hey, go wave your arm out of the door real quick, will you?" Nguyen did as he was told, and I saw his arm waving outside of the guard shack on the first monitor screen. "Okay, so these monitors are showing a live feed then. Come on back inside, Terry. Can you see if you can pull up any recorded video, say, from the last week?" Depending on what kind of recording system they used and their data storage memory base," said Nguyen as his fingers again danced over the keyboard. "I might be able to... Oh, there, got it." The first monitor, the one connected to the camera mounted on the pole just outside of the guard shack, showed the timestamp on the video being taken at 1830 hours, 7 days prior, when the shadows were growing longer as the sun began dipping towards the ocean. It was a top-down view, given the height of the camera angle, and the bottom third of the video was obscured by the edges of the guard shack itself. But what the camera did pick up was a scene of utter panic, as people in both civilian and military clothing could be seen fleeing out of the entrance gates, all of them with horrified expressions on their faces. There was very muffled audio that accompanied the video, and the sounds of screams along with automatic weapons firing could be heard. But who was shooting and what they were shooting at could not be seen. All of a sudden, a searing hiss could be heard, followed by the body of a Chinese soldier falling backwards into the camera frame, eyes wide with shock and fear, his bloody hands clutching his abdomen, which had been ripped open. This was followed again by a snake-like hiss, and the body of the Chinese soldier suddenly being pulled out of the frame by some powerful, unseen force. The second monitor showed the feed from a camera, which was apparently mounted atop one of the entrances of the research facility. The video again showed dozens of panicking people, this time wearing mostly civilian clothing, and several wearing clinical or medical scrubs, pushing and shoving to leave the building. Behind them, unseen from inside the building, came more screams, intermingled by the sounds of weapons being fired, along with more of the unexplained hissing sounds. The third monitor, the one which showed only static, came alive with the footage of when it was active a week ago. The security camera was apparently mounted at the dock nearby, pointing towards the lagoon and the Yang Hong tied to the dock. The research vessel was belching smoke and fire and was already beginning to list to one side. But that wasn't the most alarming thing from the video. In the waters next to it, things were rising out of the lagoon. All of a sudden, a large webbed claw smacked down the camera, and the video immediately turned to static. "Hey, LT," I whispered into my earpiece. "You need to come see this." Well, a week or so ago, Taxi Dancer, the wonderful author of this story, wrote a story a bit outside of his comfort zone, I would say, and it enraged absolutely everybody who listened to it. Be you left-wing, right-wing, it doesn't matter. Everybody was very, very upset by the story he wrote. And, it seemed like a bit of an overreaction to me. But here he is back on form with what he does best. Did you enjoy that one? I really hope so, because that's parts 1 and 2 of a 4-part story, with parts 3 and 4 coming fast at you tomorrow evening. So you're going to join me again for the conclusion of this one, aren't you? Of course you are. So, Thursday night treat coming up. There'll be a podcast as well. Oh my God, all of that in one evening. Yeah, so back again tomorrow night and on Friday. But see you again real soon. Yeah? Till the next time. Very, very sweet dreams and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.